here at IPJ today to do a presentation on Abu Muslim Khorasani. He was one of the first Iranian revolutionaries after Islam, and for me, I think one of the reasons why I find studying Abu Muslim Khorasani important and the whole history of this time period is when you study, a lot of times you think about things in stationary terms. You think, this is this and that is that. But when you look at things from a historical perspective, you see how, ideas, religions, perspectives came to be, how they came in place, how there was a set of events that led up to the development of a series of ideas or movements. And that helps to put it in a context for you where you understand much better where it's coming from. And I also want to preface my talk by saying, IPJ doesn't have a specific political or religious stance, but we just promote discussion about these kinds of topics. And since Abu Muslim Khorasani came on the heels of the early Islamic period, a lot of the stuff that's religious matters today was the political matters of that age. And so I will be covering it in the presentation. Now, it doesn't mean I support any particular stance. Okay. The background before Abu Muslim's time begins with Karbala, all the infighting after the development of Islam and the rise of the Umayyad caliphate. At Karbala, well, first of all, there was different factions after Islam developed and Muhammad passed away. Some believed that the caliphate and the leadership of the Islamic community should remain with Ali, Muhammad's cousin, and his descendants, because he married Muhammad's daughter and he had a lot of descendants through her. So some people believe the leaders of the Islamic community should come through their descendants. Other people disagree, including one of Muhammad's other wives, Aisha, who supported Uthman as the next caliphate. And there was a lot of infighting between these groups, and the descendants of these groups eventually led to the development of Sunnis and Shias, Shias being followers of Ali and Sunnis being the other faction. And at Karbala, the Umayyad caliphate, the Sunni caliphate, killed Hassan and Hussein, Ali's sons, through Muhammad's daughter, and a lot of other of Muhammad's descendants and a lot of important Shias. At this point in time, Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, he was another one of Ali's sons through another wife, was one of the few remaining prominent Shias, and he took it upon himself to spread the Shia movement so it wouldn't die out. And after he passed away, his son wanted to keep the movement going and lead the leadership. And his son was also killed, and he passed the leadership on to Muhammad, who passed it on to his son Ibrahim, who are from another family that's related to Muhammad's family. I have a picture later on so you can see how it's all related. And this is the beginning of where the Abbasid dynasty came to power. And it's kind of ironic because the Abbasids were very anti-Shia during their reign, but they relied heavily on Shia propaganda and Shia movements to help stir up resentment against the Sunni caliphate, the Umayyads, to overthrow them so they could come to power. They focused a lot of their Shia missionary works in Iran because they saw this as a place where their teachings could take hold. A lot of the Western Middle East, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, this area was heavily under Umayyad control. If they tried missionary work here, it would be very dangerous. Khorasan, Eastern Iran, was a lot more distant and outside the sphere of influence of the caliphate. So they had a lot more opportunity to spread Shia Islam over here. And on top of that, there was a lot of movements growing over there. The people didn't have that strong of an identity at the time. They were in turmoil because a lot of them had been vassals of the Sassanid Empire, the huge Persian Empire. When that collapsed, they didn't have a whole lot of attachment to that regime because that regime was a kingship and the power was heavily concentrated in the royal hands. So a lot of people felt disenfranchised by that. However, once the Arabs took over, they promised a better life, and they promised that Islam taught equality and they would try to treat everyone equally, but that didn't happen. Eventually the government was based on kinship. Race was very important, as well as your relation to the caliph. People who were related to the caliph got the good positions in the government, got a lot of the funding and the money, and other people didn't, and there's a lot of anger growing in that area. So they saw Iran as a good area for missionary work to build a movement.
Really all over.
And again, just some of the reason was the oppression. One of the things was the Umayyads were against the Abbasids, the descendants of Ali, and the Shias see the descendants of Ali as the imams, the teachers who carry on Muhammad's work. So a lot of the people who were Shias were against the Umayyads. They also persecuted religious minorities. They taxed them really highly. In fact, this is one of the reasons that prevented them initially from converting everyone to Islam. They realized they could get a lot more revenue from people who were not Muslims because they charged them higher taxes. They had racist policies even towards new Muslims. They didn't see non-Arab Muslims as on the same level as them. And they thought their language was more superior because it was in the Quran, it was written in Arabic. There's a lot of corruption, perceived corruption, and probably actual corruption in the Umayyad government. The government was based on kinship, so your relation, and the Arabic society at the time was very tribal, so your tribal relationship played a big role in you getting a favorable position in the government. And that's part of the same system of kinship was part of the Abbasids argument to the Shias. They said, hey, we're more closely related to the Prophet's family. We're descendant from his uncle. So if you support us, we're going to give you the power back. We're kin to each other. Didn't end up happening, but that's what they said. Okay. With all this family stuff, it gets kind of confusing. So I drew out a family tree of some of the Abbasids and the Imams and their common line of descent. Really, when you look at all the Arab families involved in the expansion of Islam and the caliphate, they were all related somewhere or another. They all go back to a common ancestor, Adnan. But the Abbasids and the Shia Imams are more closely related. They come from a common ancestor called Hashem. That's why the tribe is called Banu Hashem. They are descendants of Hashem. This Muhammad is the Prophet Muhammad, son of Abdullah. Abbas was Muhammad's uncle, and from him came Muhammad and Ibrahim, the guys who were doing the missionary work out in Khorasan in eastern Iran to convert people to Shiaism. And this is the line of the Imams in 12 Shia Islam. Comes through the descendants of Ali, Muhammad's cousin who married Muhammad's daughter. In Karbala, Hassan and Hussein were killed. So Muhammad ibn Hanafiya took it upon him to spread Shia Islam, passed the job on to his son, and he died. And his son passed it on to Muhammad. And Muhammad was killed, murdered, and Ibrahim took over. Now, a little bit about Abu Muslim. That's the historical background, so you see when Abu Muslim comes in. His origins. Major sources conflict over where he was born, but most say either he was born in Marv, in Khorasan, or in Isfahan. There's a lot of stories about who his ancestors were. All of them are dubious, but a lot of sources say he was related to some big Iranian figures, either Bandad Hormuz, who was an Iranian rebel who resisted the Arab control, Buzurg Meh, who was a famous vizier in the Sassanid Empire, and as a guy credited with inventing backgammon, and Budas, who was a semi-mythical warrior mentioned in the Shah Namen. And later sources also say he was descended from the Prophet's family, from Banu Hashem, but that's very dubious, and mainly believed by Shia sources. He spent his teenage years in Kufa in southern Iraq, and then when he was making Hajj in Mecca, he met Imam Ibrahim, the leader of the Abbasids, who was currently at that time